Hello, work life warriors. I hope you're doing well. Today, I just wanted to stop past and discuss the book that I'm reading for 2 weeks because it's like over a 400 page book. It's called Antifragile. And I did an overview of the first couple of chapters that I read, just kind of the idea what led me to purchasing the book and why I thought it would be beneficial to read and help me make a very important decision in my life. So in this video, I just kind of want to go over some of the key things that I highlighted as I read through the first, I think, 6 or 7 chapters. It's only maybe about 7 or 8 notes that I had, but I kind of just want to talk to you about some of the things that, registered when I thought about it. So again, it's Anti-Fragile. And the first one came out of chapter 2. And it's talking about like so the idea is just talking about like what innovation is like, and it's just talking about like how humans overcome what happens to them by overcompensating. And overcompensating is the deciding that everything in life happens to you. Happens for you instead of to you. So if you change your mindset of thinking like, oh, this bad thing that doesn't feel good, that I don't particularly want to happen to me, but it's happening for me because it's getting me to where I need to go and turning me into who I need to be, then you approach it differently. You approach it with an open mind. And with doing that, you're overcompensating for the experience that you're having. It doesn't have to be a negative experience, even if it's a negative experience. It doesn't have to be a neutral experience, which means like something that you don't learn from, that you think, oh, it's happening to me. It can be an experience where it's happening for you. And so he's talking about the excess energy released from the overreaction to setbacks is what innovates. So it's just kind of this idea of like, if you have we talk about people having fire in their belly, but when you have everything you need, fire in your belly goes away, it dissipates. And if you were born, in such a situation where all your needs are taken care of, you may never develop the fire. And so this is a matter of like innovation came out of necessity. People innovate because they need something that is not offered right now in this moment. And so they seek to fill in the gap, they seek to fill in the hole and create a solution for what is missing. And so if we want innovation, we have to realize that, again, innovation is coming from the lessons and the experiences, or the lessons that we learn from the experiences while here, instead of just allowing things to happen to you without learning anything. The way you can make it happen for you is to make every single lesson you learn, take something from it, grow from it, develop, stretch, grow. um Another one he talks about, they always mowing the lawn around here. Another one they talk about, he talks about is talking about like stress. And he says, the frequency of stress matters a bit. Humans tend to do better with accurate than chronic stress, particularly when the former are followed by ample time for recovery, which allows the stressors to do their job as messengers. And this reminds me just of everyday life. We put so much on our plate that we do not have time to kind of like relax and heal from the stressors, or just have downtime from all of the stresses that we have in our lives. A lot of people go from one stressor to the next stressor. They move on from one stressor to the next stressor. I press pause real quick because it was kind of loud. I just waited for him to walk away. But move on from one stressor to the next stressor to the next stressor, because we have made so many decisions in our lives that yield more stress than anything else. And so this idea of we can have it all, grind mentality, is like there isn't any downtime to heal from the stresses of life, and these things overall impact the quality of your life. Acute stress is normal for human being. It's a part of living, but the chronic stress is what's killing us. It's what's causing disease and illnesses and all types of, depression and anxiety and panic attacks, because we don't have enough time to kind of relax. And it's really frowned upon to be like relaxing or just to be. We're taught to do more than be. And so it is our responsibility to choose lives that yield the least amount of stress. And if you have a high stressful life, you have to have an equal amount of relaxation and downtime. You have to you have to have the time or create the time for you to heal from the stresses that you have in life, or else they, wreak havoc on your body. And so that's what this is, talking about. So it's saying like acute stress that happens, even though it may be something that is big, you may get something that, is, you may lose a loved one, but you don't lose a loved one every day. Losing a loved one is less dramatic to you than if you, for instance, have a stressor like a boss, a mortgage, tech problems, guilt over procrastination with one's tax returns, exams, pressures, chores, emails to answer, forms to complete, daily commutes, the things that make you feel trapped in life. These things are chronic and they have consequences. You can't continue to mistreat your body and think that it's going to show up for you and be effective and perform at an optimal rate when you are constantly mistreating it and not giving it the downtime it needs to renew and restore and heal. And so the next one talks about fragile need, like the fragile needs are so he says we can simplify the relationships between fragility errors and anti-fragility as follow. When you are fragile, you depend on things following the exact planned course with little deviation as possible, for deviations are more harmful than helpful. This is why the fragile needs to be very predictive in its approach, and conversely, predictive systems called fragility. When you want deviations and you don't care about the possible dispersions of outcome that the future can bring, since most will be helpful, you are anti-fragile. Now let me repeat the last part. When you want deviations and you don't care about the possible dispersion of outcomes that the future can bring, since most will be helpful, you are anti-fragile. So it's like the more controlling you are, the more fragile you are. The more you have to control yourself and everything around you, the more fragile you are. When things do not work in your favor or work the way that you planned them, you feel fragile, you feel vulnerable, you feel open, and all of your actions and emotions will stem from that feeling. But when you're not tied to any given feeling, any given outcome, you know that all outcomes are for you, then you are anti-fragile. So it's kind of like the difference between being something hard and rigid, which is fragile, because it the substance, is hard, which means it has more control, as opposed to, on the other side, I would say flexible, which is anti-fragility. You're flexible in what's happening because all of it is happening for you. So you're not really attached to one outcome over the other. All of it is for you. And a lot of us in life, we get really controlling. We want things the way we want, and we may be blocking our blessing, missing what's for us, because we want what we want. We have this idea, we're very controlling. This is what I want. This is how I want it. And it may not be what you actually need. And it's not until you're able to flow and see that all things is, all things can actually help you and can be what you need if you take the mindset of anti-fragility. And let's go to the next one. So I like his definition of a loser. He says, my characteristic of a loser is someone who, after making a mistake, doesn't introspect, doesn't exploit it, feel embarrassed and defensive rather than enrich with a new piece of information, and tries to explain why he made the mistakes rather than moving on. These types often consider themselves the victims of some large plot, a bad boss, or bad weather. Absolutely. This is my experience. One time I worked for a company, and it was just my very first day, and I made a mistake learning how to do something, and so I owned my mistake. And at the time the group leaders asked, "Why did you apologize? Don't ever admit, when you made a mistake. That shows weakness." And I just thought that that was so interesting, and it really rocked my thinking because it's the complete opposite of how I think. I really believe in integrity and accountability. So if you make a mistake, then you take the accountability, you learn from it, and you don't do it again. But to not acknowledge the problem is to disregard everyone who also have ties to the problem, their feelings, their emotion, their time, their effort. And so you had, to me, true character, or to have integrity, means to own your mistakes, to not let it hit your self-esteem when you make a mistake, because to be human is to error. So you made a mistake. So why wouldn't I own it and learn from it so I don't do it again? And I think a lot of this, and that we have, is because people make mistakes, they don't own it, and they don't learn from it, and they continually do it again. And they're not champions of their own experience of saying, okay, it happened to me, but what can I gather from it? What can I get? How can I let this make me great? How can I let it improve me? And it's kind of really, sad that each moment or each experience or each anything isn't met with the mindset that it is an opportunity, and it can help grow, stretch you. It can help further you, your objectives, your goals, your mission, your dream, everything. Like, it's all an opportunity. And so when it says, a loser is someone who doesn't, after making mistakes, introspect, doesn't exploit it, feels embarrassed and defensive rather than enriched with a new piece of information. It's like, it reminds me of the story of, Einstein, when they say, "Oh, you failed 1,000 times," and he said, "No, I just learned 1,000 ways that it won't work." In this society, we only reward what works, and we don't reward the people who fail, who showed us what doesn't work, because we're not only accountable for what we do, we're also accountable for what we don't do. So in that sense, we're not only accountable for the win, we also are accountable for what is considered the fail, because each of it has learning information, and it has information to help you grow, stretch, develop, learn, grow. So why would we be scared of that information? Why would we feel embarrassed? This is a learning environment. All of us are learning and developing. Nobody is an expert and do everything right. And so everything is an opportunity to grow, stretch, and develop. Then he talks about, while sacrifice, um, as a modus is obviously in the case of an ant colony, I am certain that the individual businessmen are not overly interested in the hierarchy for the greater good of the economy. Necessarily they are therefore necessarily concerned in seeking anti-fragility, or at least some level of robustness for themselves. That's not necessarily compatible with the interests of the collective, that is, the economy. So there's a problem in which the property of the sum, the aggregate, varies from that of each of the parts. In fact, it wants harm to the parts. And this is the idea that I have a hard time with. I have a hard time with, deliberately hurting the individual for the collective. If the individual says to you that they have a pain state that isn't working, and we don't do something as a collective to fix it, then we have failed. Now, it is one thing if the individual is silent about it, because only you know your needs. So if you have a pain point, you have to tell people what it is. And as a collective, we should work together to solve it, because a problem for one is a problem for all. But I do not like the idea of this one size fit all, when we know it's a one size fit most. And if you don't fit in the most, then you're left behind, or you're outcast, or you're deemed unworthy, or a troublemaker, or a deviant. And I really think that the individual is what make the whole, and the individual who doesn't uh, automatically fit in with the one size fit most is the most interesting. That is the person you have the most to learn from. And if they haven't come to the same consensus of you as you, instead of being defensive, it would seem that more people would be more curious. But that's not really what the person is met with. But in order, as far as improvement or continuous improvement of our society, the way we improve our society is through the people who have the pain stake, the individuals whom are letting you know, like, this is my pain state, this is my problem, this is what I have going on. And it's up to us as a collective to try to like work together and make sure that that is taken care of. But and that's just because globally right now we are so far into this. But if you think about it, in the idea of when you're creating groups, you always want to make sure that every individual, before it ever gets to a mass number, needs are being served. And you're adding people who needs are served, so no person is ever left behind. Or if they are left behind and they tell you about their pain point, that they're shunned for doing so. They should be openly received and respected and understood and cherished, and understand that that is an opportunity to learn and to improve the strength of the society, because society is only as strong as its weakest link. Is only as strong as the person strongest, strong is only as strong as the person with the weakest character. And so it's our responsibility when people, say when they ask for help, for us to extend that. And so I thought that that was very interesting. Um, so it says, now, by disrupting the model, we will see with bailouts, governments typically favor a certain class of firms that are large enough to require being saved in order to avoid contagion to the other businesses. This is the opposite of healthy risk taking. It is transferring fragility from the unfit to the collective. People have difficulty realizing that the solution is building a system in which nobody's fail can drag others down, for continuous failures work to preserve the system. Paradoxically, many government interventions and social policies end up hurting the weak and consolidating the established. Absolutely, and it's because of how we are building things, and we build it from the top down mentality. The people at the top, or the people who are not in the class of people, makes decisions, or not in the group of people, makes decisions for the other group of people. So we, for instance, for example, we have men making decisions for women, homosexuals making decisions for heterosexuals, Europeans making decisions for, Africans or African Americans, or European Americans making decisions for African Americans. We have so many people who are, or CEOs who are making decisions for lower level or bottom level employees, and they don't necessarily live that lifestyle, and they don't even know what the pain point of that lifestyle is. And so we have to create a system from the bottom up, or we have to rework the system where the person who is asking for help at the bottom is able to receive the help, and from the beginning create from the bottom up, so that all individuals are covered, kind of like what I just said, that we're only as strong as our weakest link. And as long as the top down approach is happening, you're going to lose a lot of people at the bottom that could have been helpful and useful and added some positivity and creativity and love and joy in the world, had they been given the same resources and opportunities. So, yes. So it says the visible tension between individual and collective interests is new in history. In the past, it was dealt with the near irrelevance of individuals. Sacrifice for the sake of the group is behind the notion of heroism. It is good for the tribe, bad for those who perish under the fever of war. So this was just kind of the idea that I was talking about, that You know, they say that we're going to lose some, and yes, we are going to lose some in natural accidents. We are going to use some. In the book, it talks about the Titanic, how in the Titanic, because all of those people died because they thought that the Titanic was unsinkable. So all of those people dying was kind of like a sacrifice to the mass population, because now we know not to build any more boats like that, and we could have lost many more people had we not did that. And so it really presented itself as an opportunity for the human race. Although it's tragic for the lives that we lost in their families, it's in terms of society, it's a win. But when we are deliberately choosing to sacrifice the individual for, what they consider like the established or the elite, or, the ruling class, or whatever you decide to call it, that is unacceptable. That is something that we can control. And I think that we should be doing, our part in trying to control that, and trying to make sure that each person has dignity while they're here, and that they matter, and that their experiences are worthy, even if it's just, worthy to them. Even if it's just worthy to them, it's still, valuable. They're still worth having a quality experience. And so I really do think it's very interesting how, again, before, when we didn't have societies to help us be able to, if your family was a banker, you were a banker. Society now, gives us some safety nets where you can be independent, where you can pursue your goals, where you can be who you want to be outside of what was already established. But it is a one size fit most. And if the individual scream that it's a pain point, there is no guarantee that the collective will come back and fix that pain point. And I just think that that's a kink that we can work out. Okay. So I think that that's about all right now that I want to talk about. I'm probably going to do about 3 or 4, because again, so I'm only in chapter 6. And so again, that was just the things that made me, ponder on situations in my experiences, and I thought I'll kind of share them with you. I'm only in chapter 6, and so I probably have about 3 or 4 different parts of this, because this is already part 2. So I'll continue reading, and today is Tuesday. I'll try to post the other 2 or 3 videos before Monday. As I'm reading, I'll go ahead and break it down chapter by chapter or thought by thought. Now, have you read this? Have you read this book? What do you think about it? What do you think about the whole idea of being fragile, resilient, anti-fragile? What do you think? What are your experiences with it? How do you feel about the things that I talked about today? I'm interested in knowing like how did that, hearing, if you knew this idea already when you heard about it, how did it change your life? And if this is new to you, how did it change your mindset hearing that, that there's different levels of how you can live yourself. I mean, how you can live here, and how you can make this experience the best experience, depending on your perception or your mindset. So I hope that helps, and I will see you in the next video. Enjoy your day, Work Life Warriors.